you find this podcast remotely interesting and helpful, then I ask that you please subscribe and share it with others. This is really just a passion project for me. It's an outlet for me to share what I am learning, which I really enjoy, and I would love it if it's actually helpful to people. So if you could please subscribe and share, it would make my wildest dreams come true. Thank you. All right, on to the episode. Microphone check, microphone check. Hey, what's up? This is Rachel with the Intricately Woven Podcast. I'm here with my hubby, Derek Neal.
Hey, guys.
To talk about the complicated body in an uncomplicated way. In this season, we are paying attention to digestion. What it is, what impacts it, and how we can make it better. Today, we are asking the question, how important is understanding the relationship with the mind, brain, and gut? We're going to see how that links into gut bacteria. You ready, Derek?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this.
This season is wrapping up. We've got one episode left. So what are we learning today?
Oh, Derek, you're too eager. You know we always review first.
I was hoping we could maybe skip it.
No way. And you are the main reviewer today.
Yeah, I know. You gave me the heads up.
Yeah, I did. So for close to a year, I have read at least 3 different books that accidentally overlap each other. Like I didn't know that they were going to be talking about similar information. In each of these books, they're written by different people. There is an overlapping teaching, and it has to do with our question that we're talking about today. I know the concepts we go over here may not be like the everyday topics for most people. In our home, yes. But as a health and restoration coach and nutritional therapy practitioner, I am passionate about teaching clients I work with how the body functions. So I really want to make sure whoever's listening to this gets to have that information too. So it takes time, but when the information really starts to sink in and the more often you hear it, then you're going to have like a light up moment. And as a teacher, I love that light up moment because what it means is you get it. And I just want you to get it. So that's my goal here. Because if you can get some like basic ideas of how the body works, then you get to start learning information, acquiring information, and like filtering it through in a totally different way. So it's going to be good. Okay. That's why.
I gotcha.
Okay. Okay, Derek. So you're in charge of review today. No pressure. But I do want you to tell me everything you know about digestion, the processes, and the phases. Whatever you know, I'm hoping that you know something.
So this podcast just became an hour long.
Oh, you know that much?
Well, I can give a lot of information. Let's see what I do know.
Okay.
So I do know starts in the brain. We've got the brain phase, which typically lasts just a few minutes.
Okay.
Because you've been looking at the food, your brain is prepping your body, saying, hey, stomach, get ready for this type of food because you've been smelling it, you've been looking at it. Then you begin to eat the food, and you are beginning the process of breaking it down. You used an analogy similar to a blender before, and you break the pieces up before you put it in the blender. So you've taken smaller bites, and you begin chewing, you put liquid in, that's your saliva, and then you swallow it. Now we're going to hit the stomach phase, if I'm correct on that, I think.
Yep.
Because it's going to the stomach, so pretty straightforward. And that's where it becomes an actual smoothie. Chyme, there's some chyme in there, chyme in there that I don't really remember what it does, but I know that's a word that we used. And
it's what the stomach creates.
Yeah, that's an acid.
Yeah.
Acid, stomach acid. And I believe that one lasts maybe 2 to 3 hours, depending on what you're eating. If you've got a lot of fiber or proteins, it's going to take longer to move through that phase. I'm not sure what else I know.
Hey, that was pretty good, though. You knew quite a bit. There is something that I want to make sure everybody remembers, though, okay? Generally speaking, all in caps, very important. If the phases, so Derek mentioned the brain phase, the stomach phase, we got some different processes. We have the chewing of food. We got peristalsis going on. We got these different, the chemical, mechanical digestion happening. Generally speaking, if the phases and the processes of digestion are going well, you're eating a nutrient-dense whole food diet, then you are more than likely going to experience a more resilient body and mind, like overall. Okay, generally speaking. If something goes wrong chronically in this with the phases or the processes, or maybe you favor a certain group of food more heavily than others, whether it's in the proteins, the carbs, or the fats, then you can start to create imbalances and dysfunction. And then you might have some whole body experiences that come with that. Okay? So you did pretty good. You got a lot of information there.
Thank you.
Good. Well done. Now, that all is one part of the picture. Okay? When we're talking about digestion, these processes and phases, that's just like one part of it. If you check out my website, icanreclaim.com, you'll notice I use like certain language and ideas throughout, like the website. So a dominant feature or a dominant like idea is this whole thing of consider the whole person, not just the parts. So when I say digestion, the phases and the process are just one part, well, that's just like a part of the picture. So we got to expand that even further to see what's going on with that.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, like when I was putting this concept together, I thought quite a bit about, my training, reading, experiences that I've had, or I've witnessed other people having. And it is common that we can get stuck or like hyper focus in one particular area. So when we get like tunneled vision, then we start missing surrounding influences pretty easily. So if we're just hyper focused on digestion, we might start thinking just about that and forgetting all the different influences on digestion.
So kind of like the nervous system then, and how it connects with digestion?
Yeah, it's like what we talked about in season 1, like quite a bit. And I had told you it'd be a mistake. I can't remember the exact word that I used, but a big miss, I think is what I said. It would be a big miss if we talk about digestion and forget to talk about the nervous system. So we don't want to miss that part. So today what we're going to be doing is tying that in more with the nervous system more in with digestion and getting that picture clarified even more. As we address the question, how important is understanding the relationship with the mind, brain, and gut? You ready?
I'm ready.
Do that? Okay. It's coffee shop time. Nailed it?
Whoa.
Thank you. I thought to spice it up a bit for whoever's been listening. They can be on the edge of their seat of like, what will Rachel bring to me today? Oh, man. Okay, so today's episode is brought to you by, not really, but a lot of the concepts I have taken, like a majority of them, both in the coffee shop and then in the Nerd Out moment, has come from the book, The Mind-Gut Connection, How the Hidden Conversation Within Our Bodies Impacts Our Mood, Our Choices, and Our Overall Health. Yes, that is the complete title of this book.
Whoa.
It's by Dr. Emeran Mayer. Got it?
Dr. Emeran Mayer.
Okay. I definitely recommend this book. It was such a great read. Dr. Mayer does such a great job explaining things. he goes really into the microbiome, the gut bacteria, but he puts it in terms that I think that most people would understand, or at least he gives analogies to help you understand the concepts. I don't necessarily agree with like everything he lays out, just because we have like different ideas, the origins of the world, which is fine, because like you can still gain, like if you have differences of view there, you still gain so much information. So I definitely would recommend anybody to that book. It'd be a really good one. So to get this conversation started, the question is about looking at the mind, brain, gut connection. Mind, brain? Why do I have those as like separate things? Derek, any ideas?
If only you could see what's going on in my mind or brain or both. I don't know. So I know you're going to ask what's the difference. So here's my shot in the dark. Okay. Brain is the actual physical organ, if the brain is an organ. And the mind is actually the thinking process. There you go.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Did you look ahead?
I did not.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's
being
proceed.
Honest too. I didn't.
Okay. Well, let's proceed here then. So when we consider like the human experience, we have to reconcile something that's pretty deep. We are not just like this material substance that just like has no deeper meaning of life. There are some that might say yes. When we look at, structures, like the structures of the body, the structure of the digestive tract and all that, we are looking at like the material substance of who we are. Okay. So the brain, like you said, is like the material substance, the physical thing that's inside of our skulls. Okay. It's a place that brings in lots of information. It wires things together to help us think. But it also helps us to make sense of the world. We have an area of the brain that is maybe more focused on like, the big picture, emotions, and the senses you have when you're around people. So like if somebody walks into the door and like they seem off, you might say like, well, there's a vibe about you. Something seems off about you. Okay, that's like that part of the brain side that predominantly the right side that picks up on these like nonverbal cues. The other side of our brain really wants to make sense of the world and put things in order and like put language to the experience. And this is the part that like wants to understand the whys behind things and helps you to make like judgment calls. Okay, so we have this structure inside of our skull that wires and creates its own like form the more it gets wired. Like these super highways that are created in our brain. Got that part?
No, you lost me. Say that again.
Okay, so like the brain is the material that's inside of our skulls. It's an actual structure that we can actually hold.
Right.
Okay, and it creates all these. It's called neural networks, like these super highways inside of our skulls that send signals out to our bodies. And that signaling actually doesn't just stay within our bodies; it interacts with other people as well. Okay.
Got it.
All in all, we can hold what this stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the mind is more outside of us. And this is like a philosophical kind of a thing too about like, what actually is the mind and all this. Being a Jesus follower and like reading the Bible, it's actually really interesting because the Bible for mind actually doesn't have mind. It has, it is a form of what we have translated into mind for thoughts. And this word is called ruach. It's the coolest word.
It is a
I
cool
love
word.
this word. And ruach is what gives us our life. It animates us. And so like the wind is ruach, according to like the Bible. Our spirit is the ruach because it animates us, right? And so we actually think about that. Our minds can be seen more of like the spiritual sense. since they impact us so greatly and it goes beyond just like the physical realm. So meaning like we can have an exchange of literally like the electricity coming out from your bodies and impact my body, but also like our minds are going to interact in a different kind of way, or thoughts might start to line up. And you get a sense of the world and it impacts how your thought life is.
It's so fascinating that we can pick up on other people's energy, like that electromagnetic pulse. It's crazy to think about. Okay, so since we are talking about the brain-mind-gut connection, how does this impact the gut?
Okay, so let's start with the physical side. I kind of rambled on the other part. Did it make sense what I was saying?
Which part?
About the mind.
Just that it was outside of us?
It's kind of like it's inside of us, it's an outside of us experience, okay? So like our thoughts, you can't literally hold your thoughts, but they can literally influence the structure of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
What you think about, what you pay attention to, it literally can restructure your brain. Just like harsh words over and over and over restructures somebody's brain. Either you harsh words towards yourself or harsh words to somebody else. It is restructuring the way their brain is actually like the physical structure. But it's coming from like an outside, almost like this outside entity that you are inserting in there. There's like this energy force. Yeah. Okay. So like when we're talking about like, the wiring of the brain, the neural networks, like you can see these different things and you can see the blood flow to different parts of the brain. You can see one hemisphere light up more when we're talking about more like artists and a gestalt thing, like these bigger picture things. And you can see the left side light up more. Like, so physically there's these changes happening as you're thinking about words and you're thinking about a plan and a strategy. But like you can't actually hold these words and you can't actually hold these thoughts, but they're impacting the physical world. Crazy.
That is really fascinating.
Yeah. So like how does this relate to the gut? Well, let's look at the physical side of stuff first. So again, these ideas are presented by Dr. Mayer, a majority of what I'm going to be talking about. And he talks about how when we eat food, so we're going to go back to like this physical sense, 101, what we eat.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
When we get food and we start breaking it down, then what we're actually doing is giving our bodies information to like plug into wherever it needs to go. Okay. So our bodies will go through this process, like we've talked about before, of breaking this food down, and then it starts to assimilate this food into the places it needs to go according to the information that's there. Okay. Making sense?
So far.
Okay. So when we are looking at the food element, because we're looking at the gut connection, the food goes through the system and it gets extracted. Okay. So like the small intestine is where a majority of the information is from the food is going to be extracted. Okay. And it's going to need the stomach to be working. The pancreas is now kicking on. The gallbladder is probably kicking on to get some bile in there. The pancreas is doing things like digestive enzymes and it also needs to release insulin. So all these things are going on. And then the food information is traveling all along the small intestine. And then we're going to be landing in the large intestine. The large intestine is where most of gut bacteria should be. There can be imbalances in that, but where it should be is in the large intestine. Okay, and there's like this beginning point called the cecum, and right in there is where a majority of this like bacteria reside to create like this whole like its own ecosystem right there in your gut. Okay, so in order for this whole process to start, you told us the first phase of digestion is what?
The brain phase.
Okay, so we have the brain phase. So the brain needs to be healthy and needs to be working. So if you've had a traumatic brain injury, childhood diseases that have impacted your brain, PTSD, prolonged abuse that can be qualified as PTSD or complicated or ongoing PTSD, You can have a brain autoimmunity where you have a lot of inflammation in your brain, and now the immune cells are kind of attacking in there. All of these are going to impact the brain structure. Okay, if that brain structure gets attacked, or that vagus nerve that connects everything, if that gets attacked or is diminished or loses its tone and its strength, now we're going to have some impacts in other places as well. Okay, so in light of that brain-gut connection, we've talked about the vagus nerve quite a bit. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Derek, what would you expect to start happening if my brain structure, the actual thing, starts to be impacted? What would you expect to start happening in my gut?
Well, I mean, it would throw off all your digestion. You're not going to be able to gain the nutrients. You're not going to break it down. It'd just be a domino effect of other things.
Right. So there's a little clue for you. If you have digestive issues, and it's been going on for a long time, you're trying all these different things, it just doesn't seem to be working, or you've been like chronically constipated for like a long time, and like you know nothing seems to work, you want to find out what's going on. Start asking different kinds of questions. If you haven't been getting the answers, might start looking at, how's my brain working? There's like these, it's called functional MRIs that show the blood flow. There's a couple other scans you can do. I can't remember the names of them, but there are different things that you can do to see how well is your brain communicating. Yeah. Okay, so that briefly kind of takes care of that relationship, brain to gut. If something is interacting or that has diminished the way the gut or the brain structure is formed, then that can start to impact the gut. And I also hinted at earlier that your mind literally changes the structure of your brain. So if you tend to think very negatively, what might start happening to digestion?
It's going to go down.
If you're constantly thinking about fearful things, or you're constantly imagining worst case scenarios, or you're constantly engaging in even like watching like certain kind of shows or movies that are constantly activating you, you might notice something happening with your digestion. And if you do that long enough, you might actually start changing the brain structure or losing tone of the vagus nerve because you're just not using it enough. So definitely want to look at that. Now, when we look at the opposite, so it's kind of like which came first, right? Is it a brain thing or is it a gut thing? Well, let's look at the gut for a second. So the integrity of the gut and how well it can digest and absorb food impacts the brain structure. See, you hear that difference? The brain structure can impact digestion. How well you can digest can impact the brain structure and what's going on up there because of that vagus nerve. Okay. So if in your gut, let's say this isn't like for sure it's not in your brain. This is not happening up here. It's in your gut. Okay. So if you've had a lot of distress in your gut, lots of bloating, lots of constipation or diarrhea, or, irritable bowels, inflammation, any kind of like malnutrition because of infections, these are sending signals up to your brain that it's in distress. It is not in a calm state. There is something going on because the brain needs to know how to shift things so they can take care of whatever is going on there. Right. And so that's why there's a connection with anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges when the gut is off. It's not uncommon if somebody is depressed, they might have some bacterial overgrowth going on. But the opposite is also true. If in your thinking life you tend toward depression, you think about sad things a lot, then you could be signaling your gut to slow down and therefore have constipation. So you have to consider these both of these angles with it. Rule out one, then maybe, keep pushing toward another and kind of see, especially if you've been trying things for a while and you cannot pinpoint the root cause or the root causes. Well, this is why understanding how the body interacts with itself is so important. And now we know it's not just interacting with itself, but there's like this otherness that it's like trying to interact with as well.
The otherness you're referring to is mind.
Right. Your mind, your thoughts, your ruach and my ruach are like interacting right now. Yeah.
Wow. So the brain is impacted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about the mind, and how is the mind impacted?
Okay. So this is where it's like gets even more interesting. So there's open communication through that vagus nerve from the brain to the gut and vice versa, meaning the brain communicates down to the gut. If anything like emotionally is happening, then your brain signals the gut, slow down or make all contacts exit the body as fast as possible. So that could be throwing up, diarrhea, or it's saying slow down, I need to reserve energy. So that can have the brain communicate down. But again, just like we saw, the gut can also communicate up. And again, that's from the vagus nerve. So if something is going on distressing down here, then it's going to communicate up. Normally, the gut is doing all these different things without a lot of input from the gut. Or the gut is doing a lot of things. It's like processes and digestion functions without the input of the brain. But as soon as something emotionally is triggered or there's distress in the gut, the communication is like open again. So it's like a constant communication, but the brain kind of like dulls it out because it's not important because everything's working. So unless something stops working, then you'll become aware of it.
Right. So would you say then the brain itself we don't necessarily have control over, but it's the mind that we would, and its effect on
Yes.
our gut. So the brain kind of functions on its own without our input, like our direct input. It's only affected by the mind.
That is our direct input.
I guess that's true.
What you're thinking about.
I'm trying to process this and connect it.
Well, it's like we've talked about before, how much stress impacts the body.
Mm-hmm.
Normally stress is something you can hold, especially if you're talking about like a mental stress or emotional stress. You're like holding something. Usually it's an imaginary thing. You're thinking about either something that happened in the past or you're concerned about something in the future.
Right.
You're not in the present. You're usually living somewhere else in your thoughts. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start doing that, you might have here right now physical ramifications for that.
Okay.
But on a different level, your mind is somewhere else.
Right.
Like how often you say like, oh, sorry, I was somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, you were not, but your mind was. And depending on where that location was at, you're impacting your physical structure of the brain, depending on how often you live there in your thoughts. And then that can start to change the structure of the brain, and that starts to impact your whole body.
Mm-hmm.
This is why like journaling is so powerful, or not harboring your feelings. Like it's not bad to have these intense feelings, but if you try to so kind of suck it in and like maintain it,
right?
Resentfulness, anger, anxiety, all those things, when you hold that in, it reeks. Grief is another one. Grief is huge. When you hold that in, your body cannot release. You're telling it, I'm in survival. I'm in survival. Nothing physically is happening. But in your mind, in this other reality, something is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the physical is responding to this unseen world.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just needed to
Yeah, no, that's good.
put that together a little more.
So let's look at how this is even more complicated. Okay. So again, this is from Dr. Mayer's teaching. Our gut bacteria is a part of the picture of like how we interact with the world. Okay. And apparently our gut bacteria also has its own like language that's interacting with our gut world. Okay. And so sometimes the bacteria that we have, and this isn't crazy or anything, but like there's certain bacterial overgrowths, pathogenic bacteria, like harmful bacteria. So there's like beneficial bacteria there's opportunistic bacteria, and there's just harmful bacteria. So beneficial seems to help us in different ways, whether it's with metabolism, it can help with our how we think about things. It has like a more positive effect on our mood. Opportunistic bacteria occurs when there's not enough beneficial bacteria. When you've taken maybe antibiotics, you might notice that these opportunistic bacteria, they're the first on the scene. So the helpful bacteria that usually forms kind of like a protection barrier for you, well, they're gone. And so the first back are going to be these opportunistic and these harmful bacteria. And so they can overgrow pretty fast if you're not careful. So you want to like, that's like when you're looking at gut balance, gut health balance, like what we're thinking about is how do we maintain a helpful bacteria status and help that population to stay stable while the other ones can't thrive in our bodies. Okay. And so it's interesting because some of these opportunistic and harmful bacteria can actually cause you to have behavioral changes, like in the negative sense. They can increase cravings for like sugary things, that's a common one, or high fats. And he hypothesizes that they can actually start impacting our thoughts, that we become like the way we think about something is actually being influenced by how our gut is, like the bacteria in there is like wanting to self-sustain or survive. And so it's like wanting you to do and think something, you know, certain things in order for it to survive. And he gives an example about the certain, I can't remember the name of the bacteria, but in cat stool, that's why women who are pregnant aren't supposed to like clean the litter box, because there's this bacteria that can, if it gets inside, let's see how to go. If it gets inside you, then it starts to change your behaviors. And what he observed with like rats are normally scared of cats, right? Or mice, maybe, are normally scared of cats. Well, the cats had this certain bacteria in their in the stool that if the mice come over and they start like eating that, well, then the mice start craving and desiring to be near this cat. So its instincts to flee diminish, and its desire, it's like almost like a sensual desire for this cat.
Wow.
And so, well, that benefits the cat because the cat has easy prey. And so that's what he was kind of giving an example of, like how sometimes the bacteria seems to like perpetuate us into a certain direction. You know, is that 100%? I don't know, but it's like an intriguing thought. It's definitely an intriguing thought. So like if you've ever had a stool testing done and you're hearing this information and you're like, oh, I'm not surprised because my gut bacteria was like all off and I was like really depressed, or like I just couldn't think straight, or I was such a like foggy thinking. You know, so this wouldn't be surprising to you. You've witnessed the effects of what I'm talking about, and it's really powerful. A key thing to know here is that I talked about the three different kinds of bacteria, right? There's harmful, opportunistic, and beneficial. And the harmful or opportunistic, they cannot thrive in a healthy environment. So the goal of like eating a nutrient-dense diet, the goal of including whole foods into your diet, reducing sugar, reducing stress, all this is so that your beneficial bacteria has a more hospitable place to grow.
So like it literally cannot survive.
The harmful?
Yeah.
The pathogenic? I mean, yeah. I mean, if you... listen, it's... I mean, if things are working well, if you're having healthy bowel movements, that's part of it, right? If you're having healthy bowel movements, meaning like you're having one full bowel movement at minimum a day, okay? Your stomach acid is awesome. Your gallbladder is working great. Your thought life is not too crazy. You know, it's more likely that pathogenic bacteria, that harmful bacteria, won't have a chance to thrive, right? So when I was going through the Wellness Way Academy, the way one of the instructors taught it was that if you think about a parking lot, okay, and has all these parking spaces, if the beneficial bacteria are the ones taking up the most space. Well, that's parking spaces, right? And so if we have the parking lot filled with healthy bacteria, we're feeding it well, and it's just flourishing. Awesome. Okay. Now, if you do something like, let's say in your lifestyle, or let's just take antibiotics. If you take antibiotics, you just wipe that parking lot out, right? Oh man, it's not like completely cleaned out, but you have a lot less things to work with.
Right.
Well, now there's a ton of parking spaces available. So the opportunistic is going to say, sweet. And he's going to come in and park his little car right in there and right in your parking lot. Right. So when there's like less spaces available, there's less opportunity for those things to happen. The same is true for these like harmful bacteria. The more stable and the more, your bacteria is flourishing, the less likely you'll have these overgrowths. And something to consider, you might be wondering, like, well, I just took antibiotics. Like, what am I supposed to do? That's when you want to consider doing a probiotic. If you haven't taken an antibiotic in a long time, let's say you took antibiotic and you did nothing afterwards, I would still say a probiotic might be something you want to consider. But if you did do a probiotic after antibiotics, that's where fermented foods are like awesome, because they just help keep the beneficial bacteria fed and usually thriving pretty well. That's not true for every case, but that can be definitely helpful. There was something that was really interesting that Dr. Mayer pointed out that I want to make sure to point out too. That we might be wondering, like, well, how do we even get our bacteria? Where does it even come from? We're going to get more into like the nitty gritty of this answer. But for now, here's what I'm going to tell you. The initial seeding of the gut bacteria in our bodies is established when we are being birthed by our mothers.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is true when we are birthed through the vaginal canal, meaning your mom had a vaginal birth.
So not C-section.
Not a C-section. So when that happens, and this is not true 100% of the time, it kind of does depend on mom and what her health is like. But when she like pushes you out, you're getting your first feeding. Literally, you're getting fed all this bacteria that's going to have a protective element that can protect you from infection those first few years of life.
Wow.
Yeah. So it happens then, and it just kind of our gut bacteria gets populated during those first 3 years of life.
Really?
So what mom feeds us is very critical in those first 3 years.
So that breast milk was highly important.
Right. Breast milk actually has both probiotics and prebiotics in it.
Wow.
Okay. Very important. So we're going to get more into that next time. But there are different things that can start happening. So that establishes the population, and pretty consistently, it's pretty consistent throughout our lifetime. So according to Dr. Mayer, we're not going to like gain different populations of bacteria. It stays relatively consistent. But you might experience different benefits from, it's called metabolite. Like you can do all these different things to your diet. Pretty much it stays consistent, but it's still good to do probiotics when you need them, to eat fermented foods. He recommends to lower animal fat as a part of that picture. But what that does is just helps the bacteria to flourish better. But you're not necessarily changing the population, according to what he has said. But when we become adults, we can't impact that population in a negative way. So if our immune system depending on our immune system activity, our eating habits, our lifestyle, environment, medications, and habits of the mind, all of these can greatly change whatever was established in those first 3 years.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
So as an adult right now, in my 30s, I can totally undo all of the benefits that I would have been given as a child.
Could you completely undo?
Okay, maybe that was a bit extreme example or wording, but I will directly affect, that makes sense that I would affect my gut bacteria
Yeah.
now.
Oh yeah. That's what antibiotics, like I keep bringing antibiotics. That's one of the common ones. The point is antibacterial. It's to kill off
Right.
bacteria.
Kill off everything.
Right.
So with Dr. Mayer's point that you don't really change your bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
well, if you take antibacterial medicine, aren't you going to change it?
Well, meaning you're not going to change the population that's inside of there, generally speaking. Each person has their own set of population that's inside of them. It's really interesting too, because whatever your mom ate, whatever you were fed, and the way your body just interacts with the environment can change what's going on in your bacteria, and especially those early years. But yeah, he just said, yes, you can like bring the population down, antibiotics by using those. But when you bring them back up, once you start like feeding them again and they're able to start flourishing again, the general population stays the same. So there's all these different species. There's a ton. I can't even remember how many there are. There's a lot. But generally people will have their own set of bacteria. Every person is pretty unique in what they have. And so, yeah. So like your bacteria, my bacteria are completely different. We might have some like common ones, but yeah, it's like it's a part of what makes us, uniquely
Different.
us too, So yeah. So like I said, in the next episode, we'll look more closely at those early years. I really do want to take time to like see, what kind of things can impact our gut health in those developmental years. But for this episode, we're going to nerd out. Probably less time than we just had our coffee shop talk. But we're going to be focusing on the mind and the habits we create through our thought life.
That'll
So,
be interesting.
Let's
Nerd out.
nerd out. Let's nerd out. It's time to nerd. Keeping you on your toes. You thought I was going to be normal. Wrong. Okay, so if you're an avid listener, then most, or at least some of what I'm about to say is going to sound familiar to you. But we're going to go ahead and break this down. Okay? We are aware, especially, again, if you've been listening for a while, there are neural networks that run from your brain to your gut. And we've already used this term today in this recording. This is called the vagus nerve. It's a direct connection from your brain down to your gut and other areas of your body. This physical structure responds to our material world, but it also is shaped by the habits of our minds. Okay, so we said that our mind is like this, almost like this otherness. In the Hebrew, they would say a ruach, the thing that animates us, the thing that like puts energy into things. So what are some habits? Well, let's ask ourselves some questions real quick. What do you ruminate on? It's like, what are you thinking about over and over and over? What do you focus on? Do you tend toward negativity or positivity? Is the world dangerous or safe? What are your deeper connections like? Meaning, like, how do you see your purpose in the world, meaning of life, meaning of other people's lives? Do you feel seen and known? Deep questions, I know. But this is what the mind is a part of. The answers to these questions will give you insights into the habits of your mind. It lets you know how you're responding to things both internally and externally, right? So some of these things are happening within you. Sometimes it's reading the environment, the people you're around. Are you dangerous or safe? This is all part of the process of your habits of mind. Do you tend to think that people are at their worst rather at their best? And I tend toward all the negative things. So, but we're going to talk more about that in the next episode about what is it, like those gut instincts, your intuitions. Do you tend toward the negative? There's a reason why. Okay, it's important to recognize that there is a reason why, and we're going to talk more about that next time. So when you are looking at your habits of the mind or your thought life, you literally, like we talked about already, You're wiring your brain, this physical structure, with your ruach. Your spirit, your thoughts, your mind is literally impacting the very structure of the thing behind your skull. Okay? You're not putting your hands in there, but you are, through the words and your thoughts and the things that you surround yourself with, are impacting this physical structure.
It's almost as if the ruach is feeding your brain. It's like it's energy.
Definitely, yes. So there is a phrase, I can't remember who came up with it. Kurt Thompson has used it, but also in the book, The Body Keeps a Score, he refers to the same thing. But it says this: what fires together, wires together. Meaning, the more often you fire off a certain pathway, the stronger it becomes and the more hardwired it becomes. So that's why if you tend toward negativity and you're like, I want to be positive, and I'm speaking, this is 100% honesty, like this is me. I want to be more positive. The amount of work I have to go into it, that I have to put into it, is so intense because I'm literally having to rewire what has already been established. And so in stressful moments, or when I'm really tired or really stressed, I already said the stressful moments. I'm really tired, really stressed, or just anything, just busy, I start to become more and more negative. And if I want to become more positive, I have to put in so much more work and intentionality into it. It is not a natural thing for me. Okay? So parents, I'm going to talk to you real quick. We're parents of 2 boys. And I will be the first to say I have the head knowledge for a lot of this stuff. It is hard to practice, so I am not preaching to you and saying, hey, go do this and be like me. But I do think we all should be intentional and we should all know the truth. Okay? When we give our kids our attunement, meaning like we're paying attention to them, we're aware of them on like an emotional level, on a personhood level. So when we give our kids attunement, closeness, and connection, especially for those first 3 years of life, of their lives, you are actually setting them up physically and spiritually. If you remember, the first 3 years of somebody's life is when the gut starts to take its form, and the gut bacteria starts to figure out what was happening in this world, in this person's life, and it's going to respond to that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're doing, so it's just not about food. Food is a very important part of this picture, but your attunement, you're paying attention to them. You're paying attention to their cues, their distress, the deeper meanings behind their actions, their heart, what's important to them. When you offer them the closeness and the connection, the attachment that they need, you are literally physically impacting your child for the rest of their lives. That's a lot.
It's a huge
That's
thing.
huge. So you're impacting them physically. And if we think of the mind as a spiritual realm thing, or not even, if you don't even want to go there, fine. You don't want to go there, that's fine. But you are impacting them beyond the physical world. That's very big. Okay. So the job that we have as parents is absolutely critical. So I beg of you, don't be perfect in your job because you're not going to get there. But I do think you can take your job very seriously and be very intentional about what you're doing. Okay. Again, we're going to get more into that later. And then the next season, we're going to be going much more into talking about kids and how to establish some good things with kids at those younger ages and then upward. So yeah, I want to emphasize one more time. I'm not telling you to be perfect. And I'm not telling you to go and now say you're the worst parent in the world because you haven't been doing these things. But you can start doing them now, even if they're adults. Going through the repair work and the intentionality is still very important.
It's worth the work.
Yes. Switching back to what can we do with the habit of the mind, what we can, how we're looking at that, how it's impacting our physical and the brain, mind, gut connection. We have talked many, many times now about the power of breathing properly, meaning diaphragmatic breathing, not chest breathing, Derek Lee.
As I'm over here trying to engage my diaphragm.
Yes, you want to engage your diaphragm. It is one of the most powerful tools you have to let your body know it's okay. Even if you don't feel okay when you get started with your proper breathing, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes. And at that point, after about 2 to 3 minutes, you might start seeing physical changes happening, and you might start seeing changes happening in your thoughts as well. You know what's awesome about this? It's completely free. You don't need me, this awesome coach who's brilliant. You just sit in wherever you're at right now, pause this, and go take some breaths. Right?
Right.
We do a lot of that. I do a lot of that. I love breathing now.
It is pretty important.
Yes. So when you take that breath, when you breathe in and you breathe out, ideally longer than your in-breath, you are telling your body you're calm and you're safe. Even if you don't feel that way yet, practice it. You'll get there. Okay? When you do that exhale longer, you're engaging that parasympathetic nervous system. When you inhale, it's sympathetic, that fight or flight or the rev it up. When you breathe out, you are breathing into the parasympathetic, that slow down. That's why when you breathe out longer, you're engaging that slow down part of your body more.
That's actually slowing it down. Interesting.
Yes. So this is really important. If you do tend to be really stressed or mad or sad or irritated, any of these things, practice that breathing. Because if you choose not to do that, let's say you recognize what's happening, and again, I'm talking to myself. When you recognize what's happening and you choose to hold on to that anger, to that stress, to that madness, to the irritation, to the frustration, you're going to, if you stay there and you stay there chronically, this is when your gut bacteria can start to shift even more so. Okay? And so you can switch over from having an environment that is conducive to the beneficial bacteria, and now you're switching it to the harmful opportunistic bacteria, where they have more of an opportunity to come in and overgrow. It's crazy. And so then when that happens, and if you keep going in this line of thinking, this habit of the mind, then this opportunistic bacteria becomes more aggressive and dangerous, and it can actually further exacerbate the negative emotions and symptoms you're already experiencing.
Wow.
So that's why as soon as you notice it, I'm thinking, I'm going to breathe right now. I'm going to breathe because this is setting me up for failure if I don't. Okay? If this cycle is not broken, if you recognize what is happening and you choose not to take that step back and you choose not to take that breath, and instead you just keep going full blown. And listen, I know there are times making that choice feels absolutely impossible. If you can get there and just tell yourself, I don't want the ultimate outcomes, which could be a weaker gut. So what's the big deal? Like the gut lining starts to thin out. So what? Well, you guys are aware of like leaky gut. That makes you more susceptible to other things. It can also make you more susceptible to infections, to ulcers, to IBS, to immune hyperactivity, which sets your body up for autoimmune conditions. Okay? I don't want anybody walking away from this or, putting this down and feeling completely discouraged. Like, well, I'm just screwed. I'm just screwed now. That is not the habit of the mind that you need to be practicing right now.
Yo.
Take this as just a gentle reminder to you that you can change things. Like on my website, icanreclaim.com, you can change the direction of your health. I believe that with everything inside of me because I have seen people do it and I have done it. And it's one of those things that you have to come to the point of saying, I'm going to do this. I notice I'm in a really stressful state. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to breathe. And I'm going to do this for 2 to 3 minutes. And if in 45 minutes you're off your rocker again, hey, you know what? I just recognized, shoot, this is a really negative place again. I'm going to breathe because I don't want those outcomes over there.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, you have to become futuristic with your thinking. And again, habits of the mind. If our mind is not tied to the right now, and you can imagine the future, okay? start imagining a future where your body is functioning well. If we know that if we imagine a scary future, our physical bodies respond to that and our brains respond to that and change structures to become more and more negative, more and more dangerous as far as like the world around us. If we say, you know what, I can imagine my body functioning really well. How am I going to get there? I'm going to take breaths right now.
Very simple right now thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's free.
It's free and it's very powerful. I would be really sad if you walked away from all of this and just said, she's nutty. She's just nutty. Or you tell somebody, oh my gosh, I was listening to this podcast and she was talking about our minds are like this like thing that like animates us and does these crazy things and like, whatever. Don't ignore this. Don't ignore it until you've done your own research, your own reading, and just really experiencing things. And an easy way of doing that is by pausing for the breath. And when you pause for that breath, again, Hebrew term is ruach, the animation, the spirit, the life force. You know, when you do that and you start becoming more like this meditative state where you really start to feel your breath in your body, it changes the way your body, it literally starts to change your brain structure. It starts to change your brain stem to let it know like, hey, we're okay. It starts to activate that parasympathetic response. There's so many benefits to doing it. So please do not ignore it or roll your eyes and say, oh, she talked about spiritual stuff, you know, whatever. Or it seems too easy to breathe. I have read from many resources now the power of that breath. I personally think it makes so much sense. But yeah, so please don't disregard it. And yeah. So Derek, was there anything that like really stands out to you from all that?
It's just staying on more of that spiritual side, just how God breathed life into Adam. Mm-hmm. And if we take the time just to breathe,
right,
and kind of almost channel that thought that as we were practicing these, just breathing, mm-hmm. that we are breathing in from God, to change that mindset, to bring our kind of in, to be connected to God.
Yeah.
That it's His Spirit that is giving us life, that all the surroundings are just there.
Yeah.
But we're grounded in Him.
Yeah.
Just that very deep, but very simple at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful. And if in all that you don't believe in God and you're like, oh, that was stupid. Man, one, we can all agree that the breath is powerful, and from a biblical perspective, we do believe as we're breathing in, God's life force, which changes everything, and so that just does change the habit of the mind. If we can really get to breathing in and breathing out and meditating on a prayer or a scripture as you're doing that, it does bring unity inside yourself. But even from a scientific standpoint, when you do that, you're bringing more oxygen to your body and oxygen to your brain. And we know when that happens, then your brain is less stressed altogether. And so it's a very simple thing that you can do, and it's free. It just takes dedication and it takes discipline too, that you need to calm down and be able to do that. And it's gonna take practice. Maybe the first time it's like, I can do 30 seconds. Awesome. Do 30 seconds and build up. That's where I started. And now I can go, 10, 15 minutes, sometimes longer on some days, sometimes less. But yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere. It's a good place to start. So, I mean, we already talked about what you can do in this segment, but let's continue on to look at things that you can do to help yourself out. Here we go. What you can do. Boom. Is that good?
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Oh. I thought you were practicing.
Nope. Recording.
Yeah. So what can you do?
Before I offer my ideas, do you have any ideas to offer?
For the whole brain, mind, gut connection. How to...
Mind, brain, gut connection. Yes.
How to understand it, how to help it, how to strengthen it, I do
Whatever
not. I really don't.
Good.
I mean, we've covered a lot already.
I know, we really have. Okay. Maybe this will start jogging some ideas as I talk about Dr. Kurt Thompson. Okay, well, Dr. Kurt Thompson likes to say this, and it's kind of like it's a fun one. Start paying attention to what you're paying attention to.
He does use that.
He uses it a lot. So basically, start noticing what you're focusing on, right? So start paying attention to what you're paying attention to. Why is that important, Derek?
Because your mind begins to physically change your brain structure.
Right. It can physically impact. And there's some people that believe it's the other way around, that the brain structure impacts that. We're not going to get into all that. I just heard some voices in the back of my mind of like, oh, not everybody believes that. Yes. I've already said in the beginning that the brain structure can impact your thoughts and how, like, if you've had traumatic brain injury, if you've had, some kind of infection that's impacted your brain function, all these different things can impact the way you think. But just in general, start paying attention to what you're paying attention to. You might start to discover some stuff. If things feel out of control, like you're like, I really cannot. I hear what you're saying, Rachel, and like, I just cannot. Like, it feels so out of my control right now. No matter how hard I try, it's just not happening. That's when we really need to see what's going on physically. So it could be a brain structure thing. There's something, could be, a certain area of your brain isn't getting enough blood flow. That could be a part of it. But it also could be that you do have some infections or overgrowths going on. Can have some imbalances, some food reactions. So all these things is where you want to get some testing done to see if physically something is occurring that's throwing some stuff off. Especially for women, if you're having, and men too, if you notice a shift in your thoughts, like for women, if you become really aggressive, then you might be having some stuff going on in your hormones. Men, if you used to be super motivated and now you just don't have any motivation, you're kind of depressed. That's a hormone imbalance. That can be a hormone imbalance as well. So you want to get some testing done to make sure, like, if you're like, I tried, like this, I just can't get there. There might be some physical things going on, either in your brain structure itself or going on in your gut. Again, we learned about how things going on in your gut can impact how well your brain can work, and that can impact your thought life as well. So, you want to consider that if it feels like it's just
out of control.
Practice the proper breathing, 2 to 3 times a day for 3 to 5 minutes. That's like the ultimate goal. Not the ultimate goal, I would say, but like a good, decent starting point. But if you're like, oh my gosh, no way, that's too much time, then like just start where you can. If it's like I was saying in the nerd out moment, if it's just, I notice I'm getting distressed, I'm going to pause, I'm going to breathe. And that happened 1 time today. Cool. Just take steps. Take the steps. End your day by actively recounting the positives that happened throughout the day. And then you can write these down into like a journal, or you can text them to someone for accountability. So where you on purpose scan through your day to find moments that you really want to remember. And that process alone, talking about brain structure, that process will solidify it more into your long-term memory. And so on those days where you're looking for something positive, you're more likely to be able to retrieve something because you're in the habit of going through the habit of the mind, going through finding those positives, and it's now more likely to enter into your long-term memory and become more part of who you are, not just like this fleeting moment of the day.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And because we know that gut health is impacted in those developmental, like in utero time, and then during the birth in the first 3 years, get to know what your mom's journey was like when she was pregnant with you, what kind of birth she had, what if you were breastfed or formula fed. This is not going to like fix anything, but it is going to maybe give you some whys behind things. And if you're like me, finding those root causes is like an important part of like helping your mind to calm down. And so it might just be interesting to know, is my gut so off? I've been doing all the different things and it's still off. Was there something back then and what can I do now?
Right.
Okay. So yeah, and if you're like wondering what can I do now, that's when that stool testing can be really helpful. And I've referred to that anytime I'm talking about gut health, food testing and comprehensive stool testing is going to be really a really nice, helpful thing to do. So
Gives you a good direction.
yeah. Any final thoughts here, Derek?
No, one of the things as you were talking kind of that I thought about was just the practice of gratitude, which we kind of come and go with practicing before dinner or of an evening. But just the simple fact of what's something you're grateful for, maybe just that day or maybe, over the last week.
Yeah.
And sharing it, not just, like you said, texting it or writing it down, but like as a family, would try to share those things.
Yeah. 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 So in our last conversation we're going to have, or in our next episode, we're going to be talking about gut instincts. Are they real or just a fake? We'll see what Dr. Mayer thinks about this. And then, like I said, for the next season, we're going to be talking about the world of children and looking more carefully about gut bacteria, kids who come from adverse events of their lives, and how that can impact their bodies in the long run. So yeah, really focusing on the whole child, meaning so that the whole person, all the things that might impact a child and their development. So I'm really looking forward to that and how we can support those wee little tykes of our lives. Of our lives? I don't know. Okay. All right. Well, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Derek.
And we are hoping to help you put the pieces of your health together. Talk to you next time.
See ya.